Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Jeff Tunn. Jeff and I are going to talk about amplifying your job search. There's a lot of people out there at the moment, if I'm talking in March 2021, that are looking for work. And what we're going to try and do today is actually share some of Jeff's insights and skills around this. But before we go any further, Jeff, as always, ask people, can you tell people where they can get hold of you?
Well, first, Tim, I'd like to thank you for having me on the show today.
You're welcome.
This topic is just incredibly important. For those that would like to get in touch with me, I'm really easy to find on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. It's JTunnindy on every one of those platforms, JTONINDY. And of course, you can always find me at my website, jeffreystun.com as well.
And you're Jeffrey with a J, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I like to say that's my author name. I go by Jeff, but it looks better on the book to have it Jeffrey.
Yes. So you've actually just published your second book, haven't you?
Yes, it came out in August of 2020. So just a few.
It was a lockdown book then.
Yes. In fact, this book was not the book I started to write in 2020. I changed gears about in March when the pandemic was rolling across the globe, and I started to see the impact that it was going to have on jobs. So I put the book I was writing on the digital shelf and started writing Amplify Your Job Search. In fact, the first words that I wrote on the outline was March 16th. So just about a year ago.
Yes, it near enough to the date, which is, I think it was about the 20th or something. We went into our first lockdown here in the UK.
Yeah.
And here we are a year later. So in terms of if there's people out there that are doing a job search out right now, what is it that you recommend they do? What is it? What's your experience say that they need to be doing right now?
Well, I think there's several things, but I think the primary thing and the underlying message in the book is that you need a plan.
Right.
This job search market, the job market right now is really daunting. No matter where you reside, there is rampant unemployment. Companies have not fully staffed back up from pre-COVID levels for the most part. And so you're going to need a strategy to go find that job. That the job's not necessarily going to find you. And while job boards are vitally important in your job search, there are other things that you can use to amp up. Sorry to use the Amplify moniker, but it is part of the brand, right? You have to always be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, get the brand.
There are other strategies that you can use. And some of the things that I talk about in the book, and I know we're going to talk about a few of these today, Tim. The number one thing is your professional network. 87% of jobs, when someone is hired into a job, that hiring has an attribution somewhere to their professional network. 87% of the time.
So is that 80? Because I remember hearing something about like 85% of jobs are never advertised or something like that. Is that?
Yeah. That's the other part of it, is that hidden job market, and I've seen numbers everywhere from 80 to 85% of jobs are never advertised publicly, and so the only way that you're going to be able to tap into those is through your network. And so part of what I do in the book, and I also have a workbook that goes along with it and a workshop that I've developed as well, is I teach the job seeker the process and this framework to leverage their network and go find the job that they're looking for.
Right. So you talk about four points, don't you, in terms of what we should be doing. And I remember writing them down. The first one I went, "You what?"
That's right. So the first one that I think you probably wrote down is journal.
Journal, yeah. And I went,
yeah.
No. Surely I should be out there applying for jobs, shouldn't I? So what do you mean by the journal?
Well, I think journaling is an incredible tool that many people don't leverage in their career journey, much less in their job transition
This is
journey.
about writing a diary, in effect,
This
isn't
is writing a diary. This is keeping track of your thoughts and your feelings about what's going on around you. One of the reasons that I suggest starting with a journal, first of all, there's many benefits to journaling. It can help you heal because if you're out of work, not by your choice, you've gone through a trauma and you may need to heal from
it?
that. It can help you gain confidence because your confidence may have taken a hit because of your job situation. It can help you process what's happened to you, what is happening to you, and what is going to be happening with you. And it helps you grow. And I always like to talk about that processing and healing part of a job search. The last thing you want to do is go on a job interview when you're still mad
Yeah,
about losing your previous job because that will come through.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
you
yeah.
need to process those feelings. The other interesting thing about journaling is it will help you stay organized, but as you go back and reread it, you will gain lessons from what you have written because you're writing about your daily experiences. And then as you think back on them a week later, a month later, even several months later, you've changed, your circumstances have changed, and therefore the lessons that you derive from what you have written change. I think the other thing that throws people off when they're thinking about journaling is how do you start? How do you create
Yes.
this habit? And so I talk about four keys to creating this habit, and there's a little bit of brain chemistry, brain science behind it, but um, frequency. I recommend that you write in your journal at least once a day.
Mm.
That gets you used to doing it on a very rapid basis if you peel off a few minutes a day. When you write in your journal is important. You should carve out pretty much the same time every day. If you're a morning person like I am, I'm usually up by 5:15, 5:30 in the morning, and I'm at my desk by 6, and I'm writing. That's the quiet time for me. If you're a night owl, you could do that in the evening. Carve out a few minutes of quiet and write in your journal. The other thing that is talked about in brain science is where is important. Always try to write in the same place. For me, it's my home office. It's comfortable. It's quiet. It's up on the second floor, away from the hubbub of the family. And so what that does is because you're writing daily, you're writing at the same time, and you're writing in the same place. Your brain says, "Oh, it must be time to write.
Right.
I'm going to pull out my journal and I'm going to write." Because a lot of times the what is what throws a lot of people off. What do I write about?
Yes, I
And
was going to ask you that. Yeah.
yeah, well, the thing to think about is this is for you. This is not for another audience. You're probably not an author. You're probably not going to publish your journals, but it's for you to reflect on. So, what do you want to write about? And what I encourage people to do while they're on transition, looking for that job, is write about what happened either the day before or that day in your job search. How are you feeling? You might have got a rejection notice from an employer, and so you're probably feeling down about that. Write about that. Write about that process. Or you might have gotten called for your first interview with a company that you're really interested in. Write about that excitement. In the book, throughout each chapter, I provide some journaling prompts. I give you some questions that you can think about and write about as you're on this journey. But the important thing is to write and write about your thoughts, your feelings, and your activities.
And as you say, that's part of the process of the healing in terms of the trauma that you've probably been through. I mean,
Absolutely.
whether you were pleased that you left the job or not, you're now placed in a position where you're looking for work, which is a
Right.
stressful thing.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
stressful. Yes. Yes.
So so that was the first one. I must admit,
Uh-huh.
when you said journaling, I said, the second one I can understand. So talk us about personal brand.
So in the book, I introduce a tool because of the theme of the book is Amplify Your Job Search. I call the tools in their amplifiers. And your personal brand amplifier really is some introspection that you do to determine what are your strengths, what are your values, what are your passions, and what is your purpose. Because when you understand those things about yourself,
Yep.
you can then find jobs that align with those. Many of us have been in jobs that we just didn't feel good about. There was just
Yep.
something in our gut that we didn't like. Well, chances are something in that job was in polar opposite to your personal brand. Whether it was one of your values, whether you were having to leverage, you weren't able to leverage your strengths, or it didn't align with what you were passionate about or your purpose. And so, as you walk through that process, and I describe a multi-step process to helping you define your personal brand. And for each one of those four pieces of strengths, values, passions, and purpose, I suggest that you do some reflection on your own and think about your strengths, for example. And then I encourage you to take an assessment. There's many assessments for each one of those categories. And I love the assessments because they can help underscore what we've reflected on. But then I also encourage you to ask people that know you. So send them a list of your strengths and say, Tim, when you think about Jeff, are these the strengths that come to mind? And what you find is that you're fine tuning each one of these categories based on almost a 360 perception of who you are. And that really hammers home what your personal brand is. And then I encourage people to look at their social media accounts. Does their personal brand come through their social media accounts, especially LinkedIn? Because most recruiters are going to look there first.
Yes.
As they're trying to, even if you apply and send in an application, they're probably going to go to LinkedIn and check out your profile.
Yes.
They may even Google you or use Bing or whatever search tool that they use. And they may even go to Facebook and see what they can learn about you on Facebook. All those places where you have an online presence should reflect your personal brand. So I love to when I'm talking to a group of people that are going through this process, I always like to ask, do you have a personal brand? And you get all these quizzical looks on their faces because that's not the real question. You have a personal brand. The
Yes.
question is, do you curate it? And does it reflect of who you really are? Is it intentional? And as a job seeker, you have to be even more intentional about that personal brand because I love to say, and we're going to talk about this in the fourth aspect of it. When you're looking for a job, you're in sales. And not only are you in sales, but you're the product.
Yeah, you're selling
because
yourself.
you're selling you, right? And so your personal brand and your online presence has to reflect the product or yourself.
And so, I was talking to someone today that's just actually been made redundant. And their view was that they were going to actually take a step back from social during their job search and then reappear back on social when they found work. I mean, what do you think to that?
I think that's a dangerous path to take, again, because so many people, so many recruiters, talent acquisition professionals, hiring managers are going to look for you on, at least on LinkedIn, and like I say, on some of the other platforms. And they are also incredibly useful tools for gathering information about the people that you're going to be networking with, about the companies that you may be interviewing with, about the people that you're going to be interviewing with. You can leverage social media to gather information that will make you a more prepared candidate when you're in front of the hiring manager or the HR professional. That's one of the things that I love to tell people is if you follow this process, you are going to be the most prepared candidate that hiring manager has ever seen, much less seen for this particular opening.
So the third of your fourth points is networking.
Networking is the king for finding your job search. as we talked about at the outset, 87% of jobs have some attribution to your professional network, and 80 to 85% of jobs aren't even publicized.
Yeah.
And the only way to find them is through your network. And so, what I do in the book is introduce a tool called the Network Amplifier, because a lot of people don't take the time to analyze their network. And so I guide you through this process of thinking about what are all the organizations that you belong to. And I encourage you to write those down and think about the people that belong to those organizations. Those are all network connections.
Yes.
That might be everything from a model train club to
Yep.
your church
Yep.
and everything in between.
Yep.
Then I encourage people to think about their one-on-one relationships, and that might be family, friends, it might be social media connections on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Those are your one-on-one connections. And then I take it a little bit deeper, and there's a couple of great books that I reference in my book. One is called Fire Starters, and it talks about the 7 roles that you need to have in your network. And it goes through them, and it's like things like catalyst, dreamer, devil's advocate, expert, all these different roles that you need to have. So you're thinking deeply about your network and who you know. And it's like, okay, so Tim is a connector. If I need an introduction to someone, I'm going to reach out to Tim.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the role that Tim plays in my network.
Yeah.
The other great book is called Network Beyond Bias.
Right.
And I thought I was a great networker until I met Amy, the author of Network Beyond Bias, because she challenged me. When I looked at my network several years ago, they all looked and sounded like me, right? It
Yes.
wasn't a very diverse network.
Yep.
And why that's important to a job seeker. First of all, it's important as a human being to have a diverse network. Because you experience the cultures and the ideas and the thinking of other people. But as a job seeker, again, remember 80% of jobs aren't posted anywhere. It's this hidden job market. And so if you're interacting with all the people that look like you and sound like you may be missing out on some of that hidden job market because you haven't broadened your reach far enough. So that's why I introduced that topic in that section of the book, and I even give some tips in the book. I come from an information technology background. We are known as introverts in that space, and so if you're an introvert and you shudder at the thought of pre-COVID, you shudder at the thought of meeting someone for a coffee at the coffee shop.
Yep.
I go through some ideas and some suggestions of how to make that a little bit more comfortable, a little bit easier. A lot of us dread going to conferences where we're expected to meet people, and we will be getting back to conferences and face-to-face meetings. And so those tips and tricks come in handy. And because of where we find ourselves right now, I also do some tips and tricks for doing video networking with people and having virtual coffee with folks.
So your final part is target market.
Yeah. So this goes back to what I was mentioning earlier. You're in sales and you're selling yourself. And so when you think about from a sales perspective, and I know, Tim, in your work, you do a lot of sales coaching and working with people to understand this dynamic, is you've got the concept of the sales funnel, where at the top you've got all the potential people who might buy your product or service. Then you've got the people that you can actually serve with your product or service. And then you've got the people who might actually buy your product and service that you can serve. And then at the bottom of the funnel, you have a new customer, a new client. It's the same thing with a job search. At the top, you've got all the organizations that have various jobs around the world, but you may not be able to work for all of them. You may be constrained geographically. You may have other constraints. And so you bring those in a little bit closer with your funnel. You keep narrowing that funnel until you find the company that has the job, and that job is open. And then you focus your networking, you target your networking on those organizations. And so that's kind of that sales process, that target market selling process, where you're finding the companies rather than waiting for them to post something.
So that's fantastic, Jeff. So the 4 parts are about writing that journal, which is something I never would have thought of, and I think you've convinced me it's a great piece. Personal brand, and that's about your values, your passion, your purpose. And I can't explain enough to people that people need to be on social and they need to have a personal brand, and it needs to talk about them, not about products. Network. That's where you're going to find the job. And then I agree with you, having a target market. I remember when I've done job searches before, it's been like, okay, so who are the companies that I'd like to work for?
Exactly.
And who are the companies I don't want to work for, but who are the companies I'd like to work for? And then focusing down on that. And that's fantastic. So Jeff, that's been so insightful. Thank you so much for that and sharing that. So much in there that hopefully people can unpack and get something from. So remind people again where they can get hold of you.
Again, on social media, I'm JTonIndy, JTONINDY, and my website is jeffreyston.com, and you can learn all about my work there, and also pick up a copy of the book or the workbook, and I even have a journal that you can.
Fantastic! And your book is Amplify Your Job Search, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, I've got the
Amplify
title
Your
right.
Job Search, and it is available on Amazon as well as from my website. So Amazon and other booksellers have it as well.
Fantastic. Jeff, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate coming on and sharing that with us. And before I go, because you've been sitting here, for the people that don't live in the US, can you explain your version of the US flag that's behind you?
Certainly. So this flag is a 15-star, 15-stripe flag. It is a replica of the flag that the explorers Lewis and Clark would have carried on their expedition about 220 some years ago, as they explored the western part of the continent. And I'm a huge Lewis and Clark fan. It's where I probably got hooked on journaling. They wrote journals. They wrote over 1 million words in their journals. So we know a lot about.
And you actually went on the road trip with your wife. It took you over 4 years going on different holidays doing that?
Absolutely, yeah. Every holiday we could take. We either jumped in the car, jumped in an RV, sometimes jumped in a canoe, and did the entire trail from Monticello, Virginia, all the way to Astoria, Oregon, and back to St. Louis.
Fantastic. I just thought I'd get that in just in case there's any, because the first thing I did when I saw you was, why is that only got 15 stars and only got 15 stripes? But
that's right. That's right. Well, and the beautiful thing about this, Tim, is this flag actually flew over the location of their fort on the Pacific coast on my birthday, 200 years after they were there.
Wow. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So we've had a history lesson as well.
There you go. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for today, and thank you, and I really appreciate you sharing your insight with you. And if anybody watching this, then Jeff's book's on Amazon. Amplify Your Job Search.
Thank you very much, Tim. I really enjoyed the conversation.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jeff. Bye.